Navy SEAL Command banned his crew until they downed 97 Zeros. They were the crew no one trusted. The unit command had already written off. In official reports, they were labeled undisciplined. In whispered conversations, they were called reckless. And in the minds of most commanders, they were a mistake waiting to happen. But history has a strange habit of choosing unlikely heroes. Before they became legends, before their names echoed through briefing rooms, before enemy pilots feared the sound of their engines, they were just a band crew. And this is the story of how they proved an entire command wrong. It began on a gray morning at the remote naval air station, where tension hung thicker than fog. The squadron stood in formation, boots aligned, eyes forward. Except for one group standing apart. Their uniforms were regulation, their posture was perfect, but their reputation? Damaged beyond repair. They were known for bending rules, improvising in the air, and pushing missions past safety limits. To some officers, they were brilliant. To command authority, they were a liability. At the center of it all stood their leader, the SEAL commander assigned to supervise their operations. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. His silence alone carried authority. Years of combat had carved discipline into his every movement. And today, that discipline was about to collide with the most controversial crew under his watch. The command board had already made its decision. A sealed order. Stamped approval. Final. The crew was grounded. Permanently. No missions, no flights. No second chances. A murmur spread across the base as the announcement circulated. Mechanics stopped working. Pilots exchanged glances. Even veteran officers raised their brows. Banning an entire combat crew wasn't just rare, it was almost unheard of. The men in that crew didn't protest. They didn't argue. They simply stood there, still as statues, absorbing the verdict. But if anyone had looked closely, they would have noticed something unusual. They weren't angry. They were waiting, because their commander hadn't spoken yet. He stepped forward slowly, boots echoing against the concrete floor. His gaze swept across the band crew, not with disappointment, not with frustration, but with calculation, like a man studying a weapon everyone else believed was broken. The senior officer handed him the official order. He read it once, then again. Silence stretched across the hangar. Every pilot in the room knew one thing. Whatever he said next would decide their fate. Finally, he folded the paper, slipped it into his pocket, and looked directly at the crew. No speech, no lecture, just one sentence. Stand by. The command staff exchanged confused looks. The crew remained motionless. But inside their leader's mind, a decision had already been made, one that would defy orders, challenge authority, and lead to a mission no one would ever forget. Because within days, that band crew would do the impossible. They would take to the skies and face a swarm of enemy fighters no squadron had ever survived before. And when it was over, 97 enemy aircraft would be falling from the sky. But at this moment, standing in that silent hangar, none of them knew it yet. All they knew was that their commander had not dismissed them. He had chosen them. And that choice would change everything.
The order had been clear. The decision had been final. The crew was banned from combat operations, grounded, removed, finished. At least, that's what command believed. But their commander saw something no report could measure. He saw instinct. He saw timing. He saw the kind of battlefield awareness that couldn't be taught in classrooms or written into manuals. And more importantly, he saw potential that war itself might soon demand. That night, while the base slept under dim security lights and distant ocean winds, a message reached the band crew. No announcement, no official summons, just coordinates and a time. They arrived silently at an empty hangar at the edge of the airfield. Waiting for them was their commander, standing beside a table covered in maps, radar charts, and intercepted signals. No insignia, no witnesses, no permission, only preparation. He didn't waste words. "Enemy formations are changing," he said calmly. "Patterns don't lie. Something big is coming." The pilots leaned closer. The charts showed swarms of hostile aircraft, formations tighter than usual, flight paths more aggressive, numbers increasing by the day. This wasn't routine patrol activity. This was a buildup, and command hadn't noticed yet. One of the pilots frowned. "Sir, we're grounded." The commander's expression didn't change. "You're grounded publicly. Privately, you're the only unit I trust if this turns into a full strike." Silence followed. Not shock, not disbelief, determination. From that moment on, the hangar became their secret war room. Every night they trained. They studied enemy flight patterns, rehearsed maneuvers, simulated ambush scenarios. They memorized positions, reaction timings, escape routes. They weren't flying missions. They were becoming a weapon. Word never reached the command board. On official schedules, the crew didn't exist. On reports, they were inactive. To the rest of the base, they were ghosts walking the runway. But something else was happening too. Their commander was testing them. Quietly, constantly. He changed variables without warning, swapped targets mid-drill, simulated radio failures, introduced surprise threats. He pushed them harder than any sanctioned training ever had. And every time, they adapted. Faster, sharper, deadlier. By the end of the week, even he had to admit something rare. They weren't just good, they were extraordinary. Then came the signal that changed everything. A radar operator burst into the command center just before dawn, face pale, voice tight. Long-range scans had detected something massive approaching fast from hostile airspace. Not a patrol, not a squadron, a formation, a huge one. Inside minutes, alarms began to sound across the base. Officers rushed to stations. Pilots sprinted toward briefing rooms. Orders flew. Calculations started. But the numbers coming in made even seasoned commanders hesitate. Enemy fighters, dozens of them, closing in formation. The room buzzed with uncertainty. They didn't have enough ready pilots, not enough planes prepped, not enough time. And that's when the SEAL commander stepped forward. His voice cut clean through the chaos. "I have a crew ready." Heads turned, brows furrowed. One officer scoffed. "All available crews are accounted for." The commander met his gaze. Not this one. Recognition dawned. Shock followed. "You can't mean—" "I do." The room fell silent, because everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. The band crew. The same crew command had grounded, dismissed, written off. Outside, engines roared to life as the first defensive fighters prepared for takeoff. Inside, tension thickened. The decision now hung in the balance. Trust the official roster or unleash the crew they had forbidden. In the next moments, command would make a choice they would either regret or remember forever. The decision was made in less than 10 seconds. That was all the time command had to choose between protocol and survival. Outside, the sky was already beginning to tremble with the distant thunder of incoming aircraft. Radar screens glowed with tightening clusters of enemy signals, each dot another hostile fighter closing the distance. The base didn't have the numbers to match them, not officially. Inside the command room, hesitation flickered across the officers' faces. Regulations said no. Reports said no. Records said absolutely not. But reality? Reality was screaming yes. The senior officer finally exhaled sharply. Launch them. That was it. No ceremony, no announcement, just permission. And within seconds, the band crew was running across the runway.
Ground crews stared as engines ignited one after another. Mechanics who had watched them get grounded days earlier now watched them climb into cockpits like ghosts returning from exile. The commander stood at the edge of the tarmac, arms folded behind his back, eyes fixed on the aircraft. He didn't shout encouragement. He didn't give a speech. He simply watched, calm, steady, certain. Because he already knew what they were capable of. One by one, the fighters roared forward. Wheels lifted, shadows left the ground. The band crew was airborne. High above the clouds, the sky stretched wide and cold, painted in pale morning light. For a moment, everything looked peaceful, empty, silent. Then, the radar alarms sounded. The swarm appeared. Dozens of enemy fighters sliced through the horizon in tight formation, their numbers so dense they looked like a moving storm front. Even seasoned pilots would have felt their pulse spike at the sight. Inside the lead cockpit, the crew leader narrowed his eyes. His voice over the comms was steady, not loud, not rushed. Formation Delta, stay sharp. Acknowledgements clicked instantly. No panic, no hesitation. Below them, the ocean shimmered. Above them, the enemy closed in. The first hostile fighters broke formation and dove. The sky exploded into motion. Jets twisted, rolled, and streaked past each other in blurs of speed and vapor trails. Missiles cut white lines through the air. Warning alarms screamed inside cockpits. But the band crew didn't scatter. They moved like a single organism. Each pilot anticipated the other's movements without needing to ask. One climbed, another dropped. One lured, another struck. Their maneuvers looked almost reckless, the very reason command had grounded them. Except now, that unpredictability was their greatest weapon. An enemy fighter tried to flank from above. Too late. One of the crew's jets snapped upward, rolled, and locked on. A flash. The first enemy aircraft spiraled downward, trailing smoke. Then another. Then another. Radio chatter from enemy pilots began to crackle with confusion. They had expected disorganized defense. Not this. Not precision chaos. Not a squadron that fought like instinct instead of instruction. Within minutes, the sky became a storm of contrails, firebursts, and diving silhouettes. Down below at the base, radar operators stared at their screens in disbelief. Enemy signals were dropping, fast. The senior officer leaned closer to the display. "Is that accurate?" The operator swallowed. "Yes, sir." Dot after dot vanished from the radar, and high above, the band crew kept moving, faster, sharper, deadlier with every pass. They weren't just surviving the swarm, they were dismantling it. But the battle was far from over, because the largest wave of enemy fighters had even entered the fight yet. The sky had already become a battlefield of smoke trails and falling fire. Enemy aircraft spiraled toward the ocean below, their formations shattered, their advance disrupted. But the radar operators on the ground saw something the pilots in the air couldn't see yet. Another wave was coming, bigger, faster, deadlier. Inside the command center, tensions snapped tight again. The senior officers leaned over the radar screen as new signals flooded the display. Dozens more enemy fighters closing in from the horizon. One officer whispered, almost in disbelief, "They sent reinforcements." Out in the sky, the band crew was already low on fuel and ammunition. Their cockpits were filled with warning lights. Their breathing was steady, but the strain of constant maneuvering weighed on their muscles. Still, not one of them asked to retreat. The commander watched from below, hands clasped behind his back, gaze locked upward as if he could see them through the clouds. He knew what they were facing, he knew what was coming, and he knew they wouldn't run. High above, the lead pilot's voice came through the comms again, calm, focused, unshaken. "Second wave incoming. Same formation. We finish this together." Acknowledgements clicked one after another. No fear, no doubt, only trust.
The second swarm slammed into them like a storm front. Jets screamed past each other at blinding speed. Missiles streaked. Engines roared. The sky turned into a spinning maze of motion and fire. But something extraordinary was happening. The enemy pilots were losing coordination. Their tight formations broke apart under pressure. They couldn't predict the crew's movements. Every time they tried to corner one fighter, another appeared from nowhere. Every time they lined up a shot, their target vanished in a maneuver no manual would ever teach. The band crew wasn't fighting like a standard squadron. They were fighting like instinct itself. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Then one of the radar operators on the ground spoke, trembling. "Sir, you need to see this." The senior officer stepped closer. His eyes widened. Enemy signals were disappearing at a rate no one thought possible. 10, 20, 40. The number kept climbing. Outside, the commander finally allowed himself a slow breath. Not relief, certainty. The same certainty he'd felt the day he chose to trust them when no one else would. Up in the sky, the last cluster of enemy fighters tried to retreat, but it was too late. The band crew closed in with flawless timing, cutting off escape routes, striking with surgical precision. One final burst of fire streaked across the sky, and then silence. No more incoming signals, no more hostile formations. Only open sky. Back in the command center, the radar operator stared at the final count, barely able to speak. Confirmed total, 97 enemy aircraft down. The room froze. No cheers, no applause, just stunned silence. Because everyone understood what that number meant. It wasn't just a victory. It wasn't just survival. It was impossible. Out on the runway, the roar of returning engines echoed across the base as the crew descended through the clouds. One by one, their jets touched down, scratched, fuel-drained, battle-worn, but victorious. Ground personnel stared as the pilots climbed out of their cockpits. Days ago, these same men were labeled reckless, disqualified, unfit. Now, they were the reason the base still stood. The commander stepped forward as they approached. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he gave a single nod, small, simple, but filled with pride. That nod meant more than medals. Behind him, the senior officers who had signed the ban order stood in silence, watching the crew they had nearly discarded. They didn't apologize. They didn't need to. The truth was already written across the sky. From that day forward, no one called them reckless again. They called them legends. Narrator, closing tone. History rarely remembers the ones who followed the rules perfectly. It remembers the ones who proved the rules wrong. And on that day, a band crew became immortal.